فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So in this next video, I want to talk about how does one go about studying a book. And so, say there's a book that I wanna go and study. First off, I need to look at what kind of book is this. You know, because each book is different depending on what you're studying. And in some of the previous videos, I talked about these curriculum books. In curriculums, they have a certain way of studying the curriculum book. So if I was to study like Benyadik, and I want to go and study the book, and then I want to review it, this will have a certain way. And if I want to go and study a book in grammar, such as Tuhfat al-Saniyya or like Tankih al-Azhariyya, this is going to have another way of studying the book as opposed to that. Especially, I take into consideration: am I studying this with a teacher? Am I studying it by myself, or am I going to be studying it with recordings online, or all of the combination of these? So take this into consideration and also see what this book is. And this is one of the things when you go about and you say you're not sure what to study. So understanding what do you go about and what do you study first. So there are some things that you should know about. Of course, knowing yourself and where your level is will help you when you go into picking the book that you're studying. And also having a teacher that's around you that knows your level, this is the best way to get the information of what should I start with in that book. And also a lot of the teachers, if they're teaching you that book, or they know someone who is going to be teaching you that book, or if it's something that's easy for that, and they know your level, and so they can point you to the right place. Because if somebody takes a level that is, they take a book that they don't know anything about, and then they just start learning it, maybe they'll use a lot of their time, and they don't understand they understand like next to nothing in this book, and this is something that can be a problem. And I remember one time that I got the advice from a great sheikh to it was YouTube advice, so it's not like personal advice, and this is something you should also be mindful of. But he was basically saying to go from Ajrumiyyah to like Alfiya right away with no in-betweens. And I pretty much, I was like, okay, I'm going to take it. I think I'm at it. You know, I got the Ajrumiyyah and I took it in English first. And like to give like an example of how I took Ajrumiyyah, I took it in English first, like what the teacher was explaining in English. And then I took it in Arabic. And then I put the two together. Like, you know, I read a sharh as well as listening to it in English first and then Arabic, and I also listened to a couple ones in English. Also, there's a version of Ajrumiyyah that is like a chart PDF, and so looking at that chart PDF was something that helped me understand it. So then I went to pretty much straight after that, I went to trying to understand Sharh ibn Aqil for Alfiya. And so I went into that, and at the beginning I was like, wow, this is great, you know, there's all this tafsil, and I was reading everything in the book, and I was reading all the hawamish and whatnot, and it took me quite a while, but I was into it, you know, like I love studying. But there was certain points where it was in the Bab al-Ibtida, and so like when I got into, they're talking about mubtada without a khabar, and I was like, okay, this is strange, you know, and I got really like confused and kind of lost and almost burnt out. And this is something that I knew that I was over my level. Like I just jumped into a ship, and I didn't have like necessarily a teacher teaching me this like particular subject, but even though there were like there's like recordings of Alfiya that were online that I was also like referring to and going along with. But this was something that I felt like I picked up too much on my plate, and I can't quite take it. So then I went back and I took a couple other shuruh. But if I would have had someone that told me right up at the front, like I have a teacher later that would, and they told me, it's like, students, they should not take that jump. This is not something that's good for them, especially like a non-Arab student. So going from that jump from Ajrumiyyah to Sharh ibn Aqil was not necessarily the best thing, and I wasted some of my time. I wouldn't say wasted completely, but that time of not understanding except just a little bit is something that you should be mindful of. So picking the book at the beginning to know what you're going to be studying is very, very key, and knowing what have I learned before. It's so that I know that I'm not going to necessarily pick a book that is at that's at like the same level that I've already studied. So I'm going to study the same book, which is basically covering the same topics that I already studied. And am I going to be spending a lot of time on this, or am I going to, would it be better for me to just review the book that I've already studied, because I already understand that book? And this is going to be talking about the same things. So this is also, it's good to refer to someone who knows about the books, so that they can refer you to a book of that similar level of what you've already studied and whatnot. And of course, if anyone has like questions about like books in Arabic and whatnot, feel free to ask, and if I know the answer, I'll give you an answer, and if I need to get an answer from someone else, I'll see what I can do in the comments. So feel free to do that. And also, there's a lot of the ways that books are structured, especially when we come into this. There will be a matn, which is like the matn, it means like something that's very strong. It's like concise wording that doesn't go into any of the evidences for the most part. It won't go into the evidences. It'll give you the meat of what you're looking to learn in a short word, and then you'll have an explanation that comes with that. Whether it's an explanation that is like that you're either like having a video that you're taking the explanation with, or you're doing a class with someone who's giving you an explanation of this video, or you're reading an explanation as well. Usually, if you combine all of these are very good things. And as I mentioned before about the benefits of a sheikh, is like a sheikh will be able to answer your questions. That is in person. He'll be able to answer your questions, and he'll be able to like fix anything that is misunderstood from you. And this is very important. And they will also be able to make you aware of some of if there's something that's a mistake here or a mistake here, and everyone makes mistakes. They'll be able to let you know about that, so you don't just keep going with the same thing, or they'll let you know things that you'll never necessarily find in a book, except after a long time of searching, and because the sheikh will have more knowledge of that. And then also you have there's some like big scholars that have recorded things, and going to these recordings will give you a recording of someone who is very, very, very knowledgeable, and maybe you don't have access to this person ever again, and maybe they're not ever going to like have another class of this again. So going back to the recordings is a way to access the knowledge and all of that they put together in these recordings, and so you can really benefit from that. And this is something that if you supplement that with this, with a teacher that comes with you and has the time to sit with you and do this, this is like the best of combinations, because you'll get the tahqiq, or like the excellence that comes from like an alim, and then you'll also, if you have a teacher that can give you his time, even if he's not necessarily at that same level, but he can give you his time and be with you in that level and make sure that you understand. This is something that you won't necessarily always find with that alim. The alim, most of the time, he's very busy with other things. So having both of these things is very key. And so if you have these two explanations for the matn, going back to the matn, you'll also have an explanation that is a written explanation for whatever this book is. And you want to go back to the written explanation that is given a lot of attention by the scholars and by your teacher. So like there will usually be, for each book, there will be a go-to explanation for that. And that's the one you sit with, and you basically learn from that book. And if this is a book that you're going to be studying, like you're going to actually be taking notes in it, you'll take your, say I'm learning like one of the books that I would say like that I, after like trial and error, that I came to something that was a good way of going about it, was Jam' al-Jawami' by Ibn Subki. And so this is an usul fiqh. And at this point in time, I came up and I had studied the books that were before it, and I got advice about like, is this the next book that is the right book for me? And this book is very, very like the matn itself is kind of hard to understand. So I definitely need someone to explain the matn itself. And then also there's a sharh on it that is well known, like Badr al-Tali lil Mahalli. And so I got the sharh and I got the matn that's at the top of the book. So I would take the matn and I would just read, at the sharh is under it, and then I'd have the matn at the top of the book. And so I'd read from the top of the book, and I would get the sharh from the sheikh that was teaching me in person. And also there was another like there's tashjilat, there's recordings of the Sheikh Hassan Bukhari, which I highly recommend for all of his things in usul al-fiqh. They're very, very good. And he starts from a very beginner level, and he goes all the way up to Jama' al-Jawami', which is a very great book, and like a high-level book. And he also has other, for different madahib, he also has sharh, explanations for these. But when I went with this, I would listen to his classes before I'd go to the class inside of with my sheikh. And so I would already have somewhat of an understanding before I came into it with him. Or sometimes I would get a little behind and I would go to my sheikh with the new thing, and then I would cover it back with him so it'd be review. So I'd kind of have both of these. And then at the same time, I would go back and I'd read the sharh after I took the recordings. So and then while I would be in the lessons, I would make any notes that were very key. I would look down in the sharh and I'd write it on the side. And the sharh mahali is not necessarily the easiest to read. It's something that he's very brief and concise, so he takes some getting used to when like understanding him. But this is something that I would put the notes on the side, and also if there was like certain concepts that they needed diagrams, I'd write the diagrams in like the corner. If there's a corner, there's space. I'd write the diagrams of what is the concepts that is written in like a sentence, and I'd break it apart so I could see like the different breakdown of it and a diagram on that. And that was something that really helped me. And then anything that I have now that I need to go and review in the subject, I can go back to that book and I can add any notes or anything that is important for me to add in that book. And like in particular, that's a great go-to book. And then when it comes to usul al-fiqh, and this is something that it is a higher level. It's not, of course, it's not like the highest level, but it's a high level that talks about most of the things that will be discussed in usul al-fiqh. But this going through and like studying this book was one of the greater experiences that I found, because I had the sheikh that I would go to that would explain the Matn, and he also had the sharh with him. So if there's something in the sharh that I needed to get an explanation of, or something that was unclear, I could ask him about what's in the sharh, and he would explain that he would explain that part with me. And I also had the lessons that I was listening to, and I don't know exactly I don't know exactly how he was teaching, if he was using the sharh in front of him or not, but all of the examples that he used were basically the ones that were in the sharh. So when he would have a concept, he would give the concept, and then he would give the example of it, or a couple examples. They would be in the sharh, so I could read along in the sharh while he's explaining it, even though he's not necessarily explaining the sharh itself. And so this was one way, a good way of going about learning this book, and making sure that this book got the attention that it needs to get, so that I can get the benefit that I need out of this book. And I remember studying with one of my other sheikhs, and I was studying the book, and he would teach me, and I would just listen, but I never wrote anything inside the book. At the beginning, I was just, he would be giving me information. It's not in the book. The information is not in the book. And I would not be writing it down. I'd just be listening and understanding from listening. And he's like, he would ask me, like, why isn't there anything in your book? You know, like, and then I was recording. And so, like, I could go back to the recordings that I had with him, and I could write down these things, even if I didn't have time to write it in the class. I could have gone down and write that. He's like, why is there nothing in the sides of your book? So this was something that he saw that I wasn't taking care to get the benefit of him teaching me. You know, like, because just hearing it one time, and maybe I understand it in that, but that information, if I don't write it down, where is it going to go? It's like, this is like a key point. So he wanted to make sure that I'm actually getting the information that he's giving me. So when you get something in like the Matn or something, and you get something that is that's not in the Matn and it's not in the sharh, and if you have both of these with you in front of you, when you're getting the information, you'll know what you need to write down on the side that is something extra. And so also going back and forth, and if you read the sharh before the class, then go back and read it afterwards, you'll get a lot more from it. Or if you read the material before you come into class, this is something that is definitely one of the best things I can recommend for somebody, is so that when they're coming into their class with their sheikh, it's not the first time they're hearing this information, but rather it's something that they've already been exposed to. Whether they understand it completely or not, they've been exposed to it. You know, and like one of the examples I can give is like water. You know, if you have water and you have the earth, and you're wanting to water something that is on dry, that is like you have a plant or like a tree or something, that all of the ground around it is dry. If you throw water onto that, the water is just going to run away from it. Like the water won't permeate the soil until there's been water on that soil before. So then it becomes spongy, and then it will actually absorb the water. So it's important when you have your classes that you've already got your mind working on this masala before you come into class. And this is a good thing to know when you're studying this book, that you can do this. And also it's important to know when you have studied the book, what is the goal from your studying of the book? Is the goal for you to say, I studied this book? Or is the goal to actually have gotten something that is with you the rest of your life from that book that you've studied? So this is something that is that's important for you to take into mind, that it's not just about studying a book and then throwing it onto the shelf and never seeing it again, but rather it's like you study this book, and if this is a book that that you benefited a lot from, then you should come back and review this book later on. Like say you go to the next level. Maybe like I don't necessarily go back and study Ejramiya, because like the book that I would study after that is something that I would go back and study, like Qatr al-Da or Shudur al-Dhahab, and some of these other books that are higher level, because Ejramiya has come like after a while. Like this is something that is so basic that you don't necessarily need to go back. But like for studying like Alfiya, this is something you'll need to go back to it and study it, and you'll need to go back and review these things, because these concepts don't necessarily just stick with you because you read it once or twice or you had it in a class, but it's something that takes review. And when you review though, it's something that you can read much faster. So like the first time like I read Tankih al-Azhariyya, I would sit there and I would like be focused, and it was something that was very hard. And this is a good book that is like a medium level book in Nahu. But then when I go back and I review it, it's something I can read quickly, and I'll find benefits that like I won't find anywhere else in that. And so this is a good thing when you review books, or like say if you're doing Mustalah al-Hadith, then also you have like Nukhbat al-Fikr, and this is the Matn. Then you also have Nuzhat al-Nadhr, which is the Sharh, the explanation of this. You go back to this every time you read this book, which is brief. It's a small book considering the amount of information that it has. But every single time you go over it, you'll get something new from it, and it'll solidify that information. And it'll also be easier for you to read, because if you've already read this before, it'll jog your memory, and you don't necessarily need to like ponder it over and over and over again if you already know this. But there'll be things that will stick out to you that maybe never stuck out to you before, or you will understand something in light of the other information that you've learned since coming back from it, that will come out to you in this time. So this is something that's good about going to the book. Don't just leave it on the shelf after you're done with it, and don't go back to it. Yeah, bring it back every once in a while, and to make sure that you maybe there's also notes that you wrote down on the side. So this is also important to know. And in every subject, there will be a book that you should make like your asl, and this is what they call like a foundation, where it'll either be the book that you read all the time, or it will be the book that you bring all of your like the benefits that you've gotten from like your classes or from other reading. You'll bring it into a single book in that subject. And so these could be the same book, or they could be two different books, depending on the subject. And so like say in like fiqh, one of the books that like my sheikh recommended, that it's like a book that is like a go-to book to read all the time, is Iqna, and Iqna lil-Khatib al-Shirbini. And so like this is a book that it's very condensed, and it brings about everything that I need to know in fiqh in a very condensed thing. And if I read this all the time, and I keep reading it, this is something that will make me strong in understanding, and I can finish it because it's relatively small, it's not huge. But then there's also like another book that he recommend to make like the book that I put in all of the extra things, all the goodies that I get from my studies. And going back to that, which is like the bigger, like which is the Sharh for Shirbini as well, Khatib al-Shirbini for Mughni al-Muhtaj. So for it's the Sharh of Minhaj al-Talibin, the Imam al-Nawawi. So like this is the book that I would actually take all of the extra benefits I get, and I'd put that inside of this book, whether it's on the writing on the side, on the side where there's a little bit of the margins, or putting in a sticky note and writing on the sticky note and putting it into the place where that particular issue is that I need to have something that is extra. And so this is something that to look in every single subject and find what is that for you. And some of these books I can like for fiqh, these are the two books that is recommended for like fiqh al-Shafi'i. And some people have different books that they will recommend depending on whether it's their madhab or whether it's the actual place that you're in. Like Iqna is like one of the books that is heavily relied on in Egypt, and in other places they will have other books that they will use instead of Iqna, such as like Umdat as-Salik. And this is like another one that they will rely on this more than they will rely on Iqna. And of course, Iqna is more like it has more details. And then Umdat as-Salik, and it also has the evidences. And for someone who has studied fiqh and they understand usul, they will understand what's going on. But someone who hasn't necessarily studied, they won't necessarily understand why. They won't necessarily see all of the different qiyas that is coming out from a single like masala. But this is something to keep in mind, that each single subject you'll have a book that you go back to, and that book that you go back to, this is where you'll put all your benefits into it, and you'll spend time with that particular book. And when you go read another book in that same subject and you find a benefit, you bring it back to that book. And that book is the book that you've spent time with and you worked on, and you'll bring it back whether you write it on the side or whether you put it on a note and then put a sticky note and then put it into that particular subject. And then you'll also be able to have a way to go back to the subject and review the subject whenever you need. So this is one way of making that book your own, and also about like the studying of books. And so one of the big things that I also want to recommend is all of these different things that I share. These are somewhat subjective for each individual. So some things, some books won't necessarily require listening to an explanation. Or maybe you go through like, say if I want to go through and read a book in edit. So me going through with the book in edit, maybe I can just sit with a sheikh and I read the book with him, and I read it so I can so I can make sure I pronounce things properly. And then he gives me the extra mufradat, and I don't necessarily need to go listen to a recording of this. I can do this, and then later on I can go back and read it again to make sure I refresh my memory in that. As opposed to some books such as like Usul al-Fiqh, I will need everything that I can get to encompass that subject. And some things that people can get into is they will see one book and then they'll get every single explanation for that book. But the reality of the situation is, as a person who's studying it, they're only going to study one explanation at a time. And while if you have other explanations you can go to refer to on a certain masala if you want to, like having a big explanation of something and a smaller explanation, most of your time is going to be spent in one. So it's not necessarily important for you to get every single explanation about that, unless this is something that you are going to be teaching and you need to have like extra sources when you're going back to this, or say something is not talked about in this one, so you can go look at another explanation of that. But this is something like in general for a student, he doesn't necessarily need every chart. He only needs like one that is going to be important to him. And this, like, I don't know how many shuruh there are for Ajramiyah, but there's many out there, and you don't need to go buy every one. If you buy like one or two, and then you just stick with one of them, such as like Tukhfat as-Siniyah, like this is more than enough. Like, and then you can also the same thing like, and like for if you're going to do Mutammimah for Ajramiyah, then this is something that you just get one sharh that you're either going to go through with your sheikh or that he recommended, and then you go through the actual Matn, and then you read through the sharh yourself. And so learning how to go through this is definitely good, and also see what works for you and what doesn't work. But don't miss the benefit of listening to explanations of books. This is one of the best things that someone can do when they don't have the teacher that is there to teach them in front of them, because the reality of the situation is the teachers are not always available when you're available to study. And so when you have an explanation that you can go to and take, this is something that is very beneficial. But of course there's nothing that can take the place of a teacher sitting with you. So make sure that this always goes first, like having a teacher that you can sit with and learn from. This is always first in priority. And then after that, having like the personal reading, and also listening to the recordings of the very like high level ulama when they explain these books. This is of the best things if you can bring those all together. And if there's any questions, also feel free to put these in the comments, and I'll answer them as I can. And also, if there's any like topics that you feel need to be discussed, feel free to add those into the comments. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.